Okay, so I hear this garbage truck outside, right? So all I think about is I can feel the anxiety starting because if there's a sound that's extra, that's my fault. I've already accepted that that's my fault. And because my mother, well, we'll get.
Oh, this is a great beginning because
my mother forever.
I love when people give me real-time examples of how their anxiety is manifesting. So let's begin. Well, you hear the garbage truck outside now, which, by the way, I don't hear. And instead of thinking, oh, that sucks, I hate that, I hope it's not going to ruin the audio because I want it to sound good. You go to this place where, God, I would have to say it's not even so much of a intellectual thought as it is like a feeling, as it is almost like a knowledge, even though you're wrong, that it's your fault. You're bad somehow because a truck is going by.
And had I not had years of therapy, which I have had, and as I've told you before, I was the oldest Jew to enter therapy in the history of therapy. Yeah. I think I entered therapy almost when I was turning 60, Jen. That's a shanda.
What's a shanda mean?
Or something like that. I don't know. I think it's a shame. It's a shame. It's another Yiddish word. All the Yiddish words mean, what are you going to do? What can you do? It's nonsense.
Okay, so let's take it back to the oldest Jew in therapy to ever have entered therapy, which I should call this episode.
So I never knew that I had, in other words, I never knew consciously that I was taking fault for things. I just felt horrible. Because I was thinking, I've been listening to your shows, listening to the show with Amanda Stern. I'm not just trying to prove I'm with it.
No, it's great.
But I'm with it. But, and I was thinking about like this feeling I had, which is almost like the Nazis are almost always going to, I have this feeling my whole life that the Nazis are about to knock on the door, or I'm on LSD, which I often was in college, and my parents are going to call from the airport. Andy, we're in town. We're coming up. And this is what I had as a panic my whole life. I didn't realize till therapy. Was not able to realize and put it all together because my father kept saying all those years, your mother's been in therapy for 30 years. And what did she learn? Nothing. So I had all these terrible things against therapy. But once I got into therapy, I could identify that's what's going on when the sound's outside.
That's so fascinating because you said so much in that small sentence. People might go, oh, the acid thing's funny. Oh, the Nazi thing, that's funny. But when it's really happening in your head, it's not a joke. And you can't necessarily stop and tell everyone what you're thinking. So you or a person comes up with coping mechanisms to tamp it down or try to cover it up or try to change the subject in your brain. And it might result in, I don't know, shutting down emotionally or telling jokes or whatever it is. But when those coping mechanisms are things we do a lot for our anxiety, then they become part of what we do all the time. And then you don't know what possibly therapy could help with and what it couldn't because you don't know what's this illness and what's you, right?
And also more complicated than that in my particular case was that my father was my hero. I loved my father. My mother was my mother and father are both dead. And I don't say it like that casually to get a shock value out of it. I'm just saying that no one should be concerned that they're going to listen to this.
Only you would be. Nothing
came out about my parents until after they were dead. And that's the way it should be.
Totally.
No, but I mean, so I'm saying this, and I also am resolving all the stuff you do in therapy, which is they did, in a lot of ways, they did absolutely the best they could. But my father was the only sunshine because he was so hilarious, the funniest person I ever met, funny every day. My mother was severely, severely depressed. And so I did not have a mother mirroring situation.
So I'm wondering, because I've heard Howard Stern talk about this and I've heard Stephen Colbert talk about this. They had very depressed mothers and being funny was not a way to get attention. It was to literally cheer their mother up. They felt very responsible for their mother's happiness and they learned the skill of being funny. And I'm wondering if that's you or if maybe your dad was doing that. And that's why he was so good at being funny because he had this, person he maybe felt responsible for. I don't even think he would consciously know he's doing it. Maybe you didn't either. But does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I mean, he was funny. Here's the thing that's so amazing that people need to know. Which is very hard to convey on a show like this or on any situation. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety. And I feel, but not like anxiety, like panic attack thing. Because, I mean, many people who've had panic attacks have had a similar background with it. When I was 21 or 18 or 19 when it first happened, I literally thought I was going to die. I was on a bus. I was looking around. Nobody had prepared me for it. And I had those, but mostly, and then I've had, those have recurred, but not as much as the general sense of anxiety all the way through, and my father, the humor must be there in the family all the way back. I don't know. It's like, you know what, Jen? It is being
Jewish, so probably,
Jewish.
And from the Northeast. I really believe that.
It's being part of an oppressed group. Thank God I was part of an oppressed group. Yeah, and my father was funny, and he was so he was the savior of the house, and he was in that way. But my mother I couldn't cheer her up because she was, and my mother has a great sense of humor. I loved my mother, and I would bring her into my act because of the things she said where she wasn't trying to be funny, like, Andy, you live in California. How are the fajitas?
Right.
But she wasn't funny on a day-to-day basis. She was very depressed on a day-to-day basis, especially early in her life when I think, because I talked to my therapist about this, that she was extremely depressed. She was thinking she was hearing voices, but I don't think they were. In her case, I think it wasn't. My therapist explained sometimes severe depression can, and then later on she got Parkinson's and she did hear voices, which everybody does on Parkinson's, or many people do.
Oh, that's scary. Yeah.
She was, but it wasn't that cute. As I got older, it could be cute, making fun of her, and then the comedy definitely helped, and being funny helped. But in the early childhood, it was all my dad for the funny stuff.
But I wonder if you looked up to him and said, like, wow, that's the man in the house who's like trying to help the environment. I'm going to emulate him.
I was the youngest too, so I was trying to avoid all kinds of problems that my brother and sister went through.
Yeah. Well, let's take it all back. So I want to start with your diagnosis. You said a little while ago, different than panic, but you had even anxiety now on this podcast. Now, why and what does it feel like and all that?
Okay, what it feels like is that you hear that, right? No, you don't hear it.
I don't.
Okay. What it is that here's what I should have done. I should have known that on Tuesday or afternoon at 3, they do the trees for the people. And I should have called you beforehand. And I should have said, I have failed, Jen, in securing a studio. So
no, I would have said, do the podcast anyway, because we really can't hear it. And the producers clean up the audio. And I'm in a new building and they're always drilling. It's fine. You can't hear it.
So the anxiety now is, in therapy, in life, at every moment, I completely forget what I've just said.
Oh, that's tough.
Now, they've taken out some kind of a mixing tool. They are actually banging metal against metal cans out there.
Andy.
What is the point of that?
I'm almost upset that we can't hear it, because I think that would be so funny. But we really can't. But the thing is, the good news is that unlike a normal conversation, I have a plan and I'm steering you places. So I
know you're so great. It's so great. I should relax
because I have to remember everything you say. If you have trouble with that, this is the one time it doesn't matter. So there's that. If that helps.
Okay. That really helped. I'm going to put my care in your hand.
Yeah, I'm your pilot. So here we go. Now tell me your diagnosis and we'll work back from there. You have OCD and what else?
AD. Well, I don't really understand. One of the things of my disease is, whatever you want to call it, that the ADHD, and the ADHD means that it's not, I don't know what the hyperactivity stuff means. All I know is that I have a serious ADD. So I don't know. It's like even the fact that they introduce the hyperactivity into it, my mind starts to break down. So I have ADHD and I have really bad OCD, and the OCD was really, really bad in my 20s when I came out to LA. I thought I had hit somebody in my car, and I would hear the sound, and then I would drive around the block, and then I would go, I bet they crawled into the bushes because I've hit them, and I'd look for them. I wouldn't get out of the car, but I would just ride all day with the horrible fear that I killed someone in the car, and it seemed totally crazy.
Now, can
to
I
me.
ask you,
And
had
I
you
went to
actually hit something, or no, you hadn't felt anything hit your car, right?
I think it was like you do hit things in the car. You hit a curb, or you hit this, or you.
Yeah, okay, I see. So you went in your head and went, it was a person, and now they're dying, and it's my fault.
Right. So like I put the jokes in my act about how, I would call the police station. Has anybody reported that there were tiny people walking around the street? And are there tiny people, and have I hit one?
Well, you know what's so funny about that, though, that I want to take apart is I get the feeling it's so real and it's driving you crazy and you're driving around, but you don't get out of the car. So it's like something there tells me that the person doesn't really think they hit someone, right?
Oh, no. You're absolutely right, because that's the other part of it. But unlike when someone is OCD about washing, which I don't have, my OCD, I didn't think it was OCD. I thought it was a concern that maybe I'd hit somebody in the car. And even though I knew it was kind of crazy. And when I went to a free clinic, because that's all I could afford, it was 1970 or 1981 maybe. And she said, she'd never heard of it.
It doesn't seem like a good time for mental health. I mean, you say you didn't start therapy till you were 60, but you probably got in at the best time.
Except, ironically, if that's the right use of this, my mother told me, for what I have, she told me back in 1980 I could get help.
Oh, interesting.
But I wasn't listening to her.
Well,
because I was still in that therapy was crazy from my father.
Of course. And how could you not? He was such a huge influence. And so, okay, so you go tell someone at the free clinic and they say what? They say, I don't know what you're saying.
I have to check with the supervisor. I'm not kidding you. They said they had to check with the supervisor. Now, they were also a training, the free clinic, they were a training person too. But that's how little anyone had heard
So did
about.
you say to them, I'm doing this thing, I'm driving around, I think I hit someone, but I think it's OCD. Did you use the term OCD?
No. I don't think the term was I always get in trouble when I try to claim something because maybe it was being used, but there was nobody identified it as OCD. Or if they did...
Hadn't made its way to you yet, and at least this woman.
Yeah, it was more like you're a worrier. You're a constant worrier. You can't stop worrying. It was more like that with they used to call me the worry wart in the family. I used to write letters from camp when I was 8 years old. They sent me away to camp for 2 months, which they should have been arrested for. But I would send these letters saying, don't forget to pick me up. Don't forget. Are you going to forget to pick me up? So that was based on the fact that I knew from a very, very young age that my parents, they were not good with where's our kids,
We'll be right back.
Introducing #Matter, a brand new 8-episode scripted podcast.
911 emergency response.
Yeah, I need an ambulance. We at Jason's 42 Sports Bar and Grill.
A little over 12 months ago, an 18-year-old African-American young man named Niles Hayes was driving a family friend's luxury vehicle when he was stopped for a routine traffic violation. Things escalate quickly.
Unit 510 Nora! We have a 999 shooting in progress! Officers down!
Within hours of the police stop, footage of the entire altercation gets posted online, and it goes viral.
I'm Colleen Sanders, and we're here live from the Los Angeles Valley.
James,
outside air on
you see how they do us?
This case presented a lot of challenges.
You got the whole PD outside my building, ready to light the entire block.
Any number of outcomes could have happened and different choices were made.
I guess what I am struggling with.
You struggle with it because you live in a different reality than we do.
Listen to #Matter on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sir, we got your test results back, and...
Give it to me straight, Doc.
You have to listen to the podcast Ridiculous News.
Ridiculous News? The podcast? Ridiculous News?
It's a podcast hosted by Bill Worley and Mark Kendall. Ridiculous News.
Those two comedians based out of Atlanta, Georgia?
Oh, so you've heard of them. I always knew you were my favorite patient.
Well, you're the best doctor I've ever had, and yeah, they're hilarious. I love their videos. Bill's actually my cousin. They talk about the news, but not like in a depressing way. You know what I mean? Like they did an episode about April Fools.
Great, you get it. So you need to listen to it.
Well, where do I find it?
You get it wherever you find podcasts.
Oh, like in a cereal box?
Well, no. I mean, that's not where you find a podcast.
Oh, so like in the middle of a tree?
No. Do you know what a podcast is?
Yeah, it's like a shoebox size.
No, not at all. It's something that you listen to.
Huh.
Listen to Ridiculous News on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, the produce aisle.
Absolutely not.
Hey, it's Alec Baldwin. On this season of Here's the Thing, I speak with more actors, musicians, writers, policymakers, and so many other fascinating people, like comedian Tim Dillon.
I couldn't tell you my congressman. I know every maitre d' of every restaurant. I know who's working Craig's. I know who's working, all the places I want to go. Who's at El Pastel?
When I'm in town, you come with. We're going to go to Craig's.
Host of The Talk, Amanda Klutz.
I did Broadway for 17 years. When you do that, it kind of prepares you for anything in life.
And the multi-talented musician and actor, Stephen Van Zandt.
When it comes to performing, that's just like a vacation for me. Whether it's acting or whether it's being a rock star on stage, that stuff is just nothing but fun for me. The real work is looking at a blank piece of paper and creating something from it,
Listen to Here's the Thing on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
But do you know what's so interesting about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder? I feel like the average person does not realize a compulsion means that you mostly cannot control it. You have to do it ... or else another thing you believe terrible is going to happen. And you are trying, that is your coping mechanism, is the compulsion. If I don't keep driving around, then blah, blah, terrible things. You are soothing yourself with the compulsion. And that's what people don't understand about mental illness is we are taking care of ourselves in those moments, the best and only way we know how. It is a compulsion. That's what makes it a disorder that a doctor has to help you with or a psychologist has to help you with, as opposed to you're worrying. You weren't worrying, you were compulsively whatever you were doing, right?
And that's the downside of the minimizing of the disease, and also the downsides of the fact that everyone is, that in a certain way, we're all on a continuum. So I do believe everybody has ADD parts of their brain, right? Everybody has, quote, OCD tendencies. But the danger is if you just look at it like, oh, well, I'm OCD, because people will say that all the time, oh, I'm OCD too. No, you're not OCD.
No, you just like to wash your hands a lot,
Yes, you like to wash your hands a lot. Or you organize your pens nicely. That's not OCD. OCD is like thinking I don't have this one, but thinking you can never get your hands clean. Although I did come to the absolute epiphany the other week that I will never think the dishes are clean enough, even though I don't compulsively, I'll never think they're clean enough no matter what method I use. If I use the air dry method, which is supposed to be the method, some dirt will get on the dishes as they're air drying. If I use the towel method to dry the dishes, that transfers germs onto the plate. There's no.
Does it bother you though, or can you just go, so what? That's fine, right? With that.
Now I'm letting it go, because it used to be I couldn't get out of the feeling until I felt I had completed it. I'm getting better at going, I really don't, because my therapist helped me really, when I first went to her, really go down the road of what could happen.
Yes.
So I no longer believe that the fact that I've had so many problems getting my taxes in, even though they owe me money, I no longer believe I'm going to go to jail because of that.
That's great.
I no longer believe I'm a terrible person because of it.
You know what's so interesting too is that what you said, that helped me with a lot of my anxiety recovery. Go down the rabbit hole of what's the worst that could happen. And sometimes you do get to a place that's like, well, yeah, sometimes, for me, if it was fear of flying, well, yes, I could die in a plane crash. And at a certain point, the psychiatrist I had, I've had him for 20 years. He was the one that prescribed medication. He's in this Hawaiian shirt, and he has an office in Hawaii and one in Pasadena. And he's like this 65-year-old guy, white hair, and he's very chill, but he knows his stuff. But he was taking me down the rabbit hole of what's the worst that could happen. And he let me go all the way to, well, the plane could crash and I could die. And he goes, and at that point, as the plane's crashing, can you think to yourself, I've had a good life? And I was like, I am paying you for this? But he's not wrong, right? Okay, let me put it this way. I would guess that, because I don't know a lot about OCD, so I'm going to try to guess now, that obsessive compulsive disordered people think that they're imagining the worst thing that could happen, but they're doing it in a weird, disordered way that gives them control over the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Yes.
But if you really sat and went and felt the feelings of different outcomes that could happen, you can't handle that without professional help. So you haven't been doing that, right?
Right. Well, what happens is just what happens is that what I didn't realize was that when I lost the thread, when it became a thought into an obsession, it would cause a resulting doom in my stomach that was not real. Just like me thinking that when that Susan, when she gives me advice about cleaning, when you clean the house, can you just, that she's not saying you're a horrible, disgusting pig who is not capable of cleaning properly. That's what I'm saying to myself. So it's like, once you realize that, just like you've been talking on your show, that that you may think you're going to die, but you're not going to die. Most likely you're not going to die. You may think you're going to get arrested, but you're not. And then to think that the prison is the compulsion, and that when you actually are able to then stop yourself before you go down, we call it like popping bubbles, my therapist and I.
I love that. It's a great image too.
It's like, comes up. Are you sure you didn't? Like a thing for me, since I've been watching true crime, is I actually believe that I'm going to be one of these people who searches for how would be the best way to kill your wife if the poison doesn't work. I've tried killing my wife 12 times. Oh, no, that's not what I'm scared of. I'm scared of, I watched a true crime thing about strangulation. So then I Google strangulation.
Right.
Right? Why would he be Googling strangulation? That's what I do. And if I don't stop it, it can go on forever, and I'm able to stop it.
So in other words, like, you're worried that with the FBI or something, they're going to find your search and you're going to get put in prison for the murder of someone you didn't murder, kind of thing? Or just...
That's exactly what it is. It's like, I know I didn't murder someone, but why would I, but why am I still talking about it? And so it's almost like, because my parents, my mom and dad were terrible about, you better not get in trouble. When I went to see Hair in New York City in 1968 at the age of 12, I got mugged, held up with a knife, hid in a store. I could not call my parents. We had to call my friend's parents.
No, I had a similar thing.
Would be dead.
My parents, I got in trouble a couple of times, and I was so afraid to tell my parents because I just didn't want to deal with the reaction. And it's not like they were going to hit me or something. I don't know. I was like afraid of conflict or being yelled at.
But they were fairly reasonable about it, maybe, right?
I think they were pretty emotionally unhinged if I got in trouble. That's why I didn't get in trouble. But what it felt like to me at the time was, if I can guess, is probably unconsciously it felt like, if I can't call them because I did something wrong or got into trouble that wasn't even my fault, but maybe I could have had my head about me better. They don't add up the 12 years of my life where I wasn't doing that, where I was like being awesome. It's like that moment is who I am suddenly. Instead of I'm basically a good kid who's smart, but I fucked up.
Well, that's similar. That's very similar, I think. You felt you were wrong. I took, I was 30 years old. I dated this woman who was going to Colombia, and I went and the car broke down. I called my father. He started screaming at me. Why did you take the car there? What do you do? It's like, and I remember now through therapy, I was like, you were 30 when that happened.
Yes.
Well,
it's funny,
and I love my dad, and I even love my mom.
No, of course. And of course.
Yeah, we know
they're not listening. I mean, and it's not just because they're dead. They probably do have access to podcasts. I mean, they're in another.
They do on the other side?
They just don't like you. Yeah, I'm kidding.
No, I think that got in there, Jen.
It's so funny, though, because I think of my parents who are yellers. They're kind of like, they remind me of the Costanzas on Seinfeld, just everything is a huge reaction. And I look at it now and I don't take it personally. I go, my God, look at their anxiety at handling anything. My dad especially, he's kind of hard of hearing. So if he hears my mom and I yelling and we're not yelling at each other, we're just yelling room to room. Like, hey, Mom, do you want to watch that show later? He'll go, what the hell are you guys always yelling at each other about? And he'll start screaming about how we're yelling. And I'm like, we're not emotionally yelling. We're talking loud, but you're hard of hearing. And it's like funny, but it really is if you want to overanalyze it or just analyze it. He's
as a
anxious.
kid, it wasn't that funny.
He's anxious.
Right.
I can't hear. Is there a problem? Whatever. He's anxious, not mad, and that's where I learned all my life skills from, is these people that kind of had anxious reactions to things, and I'm still undoing it. But in other words, my point is that all these little issues that we learned as kids and all the anxiety comes out in our relationships with friends, husbands, wives.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lot of work. And it's interesting that it takes so long to find out what's wrong. Like, it's not a conflict you have with authority if it happens at work. It's not necessarily a love issue if it happens in relationships. It's just fucking anxiety, either OCD,
Yes.
So let's get back to something you said. You said a thought can turn into an obsession. Now, I'm assuming before therapy, you probably, and most people, would not notice when that's happening. Can you notice it now? Can you go, uh-oh, I have to stop this thought from becoming an obsession? And if you can, what do you do?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what I'll tell you. Luckily, predictably, it's only certain areas that it comes up in. So I'll give you one of my big areas. I'll give you even the example of the person, because I don't think it has anything to do with our relationship. Julia Sweeney is like very much of an atheist, and she's an atheist. And so I'm get very, very disgusted by new atheism and and have gotten so many arguments online about people. To me, it's like, my mother was converted to a Quaker. It was the best thing that she ever did. She didn't like being Jewish, and she got so much out of being Quaker. So I get into this part where I'm arguing with Julia Sweeney in my head, not online. I've had to argue with her before online, or people who are. It always is like, I really respect her. She's very talented, and then she has this point of view, and then what happens is I realize I'm absolutely playing the relationship with my father, because my father was so intelligent. And when I was like 12 or 13 and I was like into hypnotism or whatever, he was like really arguing with me about any beliefs that I had, not just in God, but just like in the ability, let's say, you know how like women sometimes know when someone died, it's like, I still think we do know. People have that sense, they know. But my father was so down on that, and I took it to mean that I'm not as smart as him, and I'm not smart enough. And if I was smarter, I would be an atheist, because I was accepted that was the logical thing. All my friends were doing it, and I hate it. But on the other hand, I hate it. And so all these people, these new atheists, and all these people that I'm trying to argue with Julia about, but it's not Julia anymore. It's arguing with my father. It's like, when it gets to rage inside me, I absolutely know it's my problem. And I think that's an area where I've had problems online with it. I've had to, and what I would say is like, Julia doesn't control what I think. My father doesn't control what I think. I'm not mad at Julia. I'm mad at my father, but I'm not even mad at him. I'm mad at what happened, the process of thinking you're stupid.
Right.
It's just like, it happens. It's like if you hear someone like Brett Butler, I always or other comics from the South, they're always afraid to be perceived as not as bright because they're from the South, which is a ridiculous perception, but it affects you. And that the idea that I'm not quite as smart as these atheists brings the rage, and then I realize I have to let that go.
But what I love is rage. Once it becomes rage, you know that it's your problem, and AKA that takes it from thought to obsession.
And then here's the other thing too. Like, I really do hate Bill Maher. I really do hate a lot of the Adam Carolla. I mean, I'm not saying I hate. I'm not going to go, to war with them, but I really hate what they're saying. I hate that they're making people, that they're feeding into Islamophobia, and I hate all that. So it's not even. So this actually has changed me in terms of how I do comedy too, because I used to feel that everything I said about these people had to be justified. If I hated Louis C.K., It had to be justified. So I don't want to get to the point where I go, oh, no, I like what he's saying. I like that. No, I hate it. But if I'm online arguing about it for 3 days, which tends to happen, not as much anymore, but that's because I believe that unless they change, I will be destroyed or I won't be happy. And it's not even like worrying about gay people or worrying about Islamophobic people. It's more like getting back into that relationship where you feel stupid or you feel